So welcome everyone to our online forum presented by Communities Confronting Substance Abuse and Refa'enu. We are pleased to have three experienced people here to talk to you about the subject of addiction and recovery and to share their unique perspectives on this issue. We would like to remind everyone to be respectful of each person's privacy, particularly when it comes to sharing their own personal stories. During the meeting, you may chat any questions you would like to address to our presenters, and time allowing, we will get to as many as we can at the end of their presentations. So please put them in the chat. If you have a question for a particular presenter, please feel free to write their name with the question, and we will direct the question to that person. We will also be sharing the links to sign into other sessions periodically throughout this presentation via chat, so please keep an eye out for that information. This session will end approximately at 11 o'clock. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Our first presenter is Dr. Jeff Berman. Dr. Berman specializes in the treatment of young adults suffering from substance use disorders, as well as co-occurring mood, trauma, and other mental health disorders. Dr. Berman serves concurrently as Director of Psychiatric Services for Soba College Recovery, Executive Medical Director for Discovery Institute for Addictive Disorders, and a Senior Psychiatric Consultant for Immigration Health in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. He is a member of the Department of Psychiatry at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School and was co-director for the Addiction Psychiatry Fellowship Program. Dr. Berman is a national speaker and is board certified in general, addiction, and consultation psychiatry and addiction medicine. He is a distinguished fellow of the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Our second presenter is Tova. Once a scared little girl, Tova broke the bondage of addiction to evolve into a multidimensional, sober woman. Today, she uses her Orthodox Jewish upbringing to serve a different purpose by helping other Jewish alcoholics and addicts suffering in the dark. Her sober date is June 10th, 2015. Our third presenter will be Sharon Darek. Sharon is the North American Director of OU Israel Free Spirit Birthright, a tour organizer for Birthright Israel. For over 22 years, Sharon has experienced counseling families and running educational programs. In that time, she worked for 15 years at JACS, Jewish Alcoholics, Chemically Dependent Persons, and Significant Others, a program of the Jewish Board. Sharon is a professional life coach specializing in addiction, mental health, working with families, teens, and young adults. Thank you all for joining us. And Dr. Berman, we'd like to start with you.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle, and thank you everybody for coming. And many thanks to Dina Krug and Leanne Foreman for really running the mile to get this program together. I'm going to speak a little bit quickly, just so we can get the information in, since this is only an 8-minute presentation. Two questions. The first question I want to start off is, and it'll be rhetorical since you can't speak back, is what is the difference between addiction and a pit bull? And if you were able to answer me, you would probably say that a pit bull sometimes lets go. Addiction is an illness that stays with a person, and there's no cure for addiction. It's a biological illness. It's not unlike hypertension, diabetes, or cancer, all of which often require a lifetime of continuous treatment. But with that continuous treatment, which we'll allude to a little further on, and the other speakers will talk about, you can keep the disease in check and have a perfectly good recovery and a perfectly good life. The second question to ask is, why would anybody wake up in the morning and say, is this the day I want to become a drug addict or an alcoholic? And they're essentially the same. Alcohol is just one other substance of abuse. So the answer is nobody wakes up with that thought on any given morning. But there are several things that contribute to somebody becoming or developing what we call now, the term is substance use disorder, becoming chemically dependent, or becoming an addict, whatever term you want to use. There are two roots. One, and they coincide with one another. The first is there's a genetic predisposition. in many cases. And if people look back carefully in their family histories, they often find a relative who also has had a substance use disorder. Yes, even in the Jewish community, if you look, you will find the family history is positive. And it may have been masked as being some other sort of mental health problem or some sort of odd behavior. The second thing that happens is that, as you remember, a number of years ago, if you go back 10 years, we were trying to destigmatize mental illness. And in terms of mental illness, I'm talking about depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. We have managed to some degree to destigmatize it. However, people who have underlying mental health problems, such as the ones I just mentioned, often don't get treatment. And then they're exposed to various chemicals. It could be prescription pain medications or opioids following a surgical procedure. It could be alcohol, which is ubiquitous. It could even be sleeping pills or aids to sleep, such as Ambien, Lunesta, Sonata, benzodiazepines, such as Ativan and Valium. And when they find that they have a substance, be it alcohol or any of the others that I mentioned, they find that if that treats their symptoms, then they go ahead and continue to use those symptoms, to use those medications. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the biological basis of addiction. And it's critical that we do that because it helps to destigmatize the illness. No one in our community is stigmatized for being hypertensive, for having cancer. Quite to the contrary, there are organizations that address those issues specifically, and I can think about breast cancer being one of them. And the community will jump in and help those people. The same thing needs to happen with addictive disorders. So I'm going to tell you the story very briefly. It's not a biology lesson. It warrants going into the internet and looking this up a little further. But this is half of a brain, okay? And it's the half of a brain, if you took a brain and you sliced it this way, is what you would see. The green part of the brain, well, the white part is where we invest all of our money in education. It's known as the cortex. That's where reasoning and thinking and planning take place. But the inner part of the brain is known as the limbic system. It's a very primitive part of the brain. You'll find it in the most primitive beings. A salamander has a limbic system. It doesn't have much of a cortex. The bottom line is the following. Contained within the limbic system is something called the reward pathway. When the reward pathway is triggered, in other words, something turns it on, it results in the release of dopamine. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter known as the pleasure neurotransmitter. When dopamine gets released, you feel better. Now, dopamine gets released when we drink after a fast, when we eat food after a fast. It only takes a little bit to trigger it. When we have sex, dopamine is released. And as a result of that, we know that if we're thirsty, we go back and drink more. It reinforces the behavior. The same goes for food and sex. So the first two help the individual survive, and sex is for preservation of the species. Okay, let's go beyond that now. What's the problem then with this reward circuit? It sounds like a great thing. And here's where it ties in with the subject of today. And this is the most important message. All the substances that I mentioned before, whether it's alcohol, opioids, benzodiazepines, cocaine, other prescription medications, all have receptors. There are places where they can act throughout the brain. And when they interact with that part of the brain, through no fault of the individual, dopamine gets released into the front of the brain and people feel really good. So you probably ask me, well, okay, I wouldn't kill, steal, or do anything else illegal to have a drink of water or to have a bagel. So why does this happen? And the reason is that the amount of dopamine released when people use substances of abuse are 4 to 10 times as high as they are with water and food. And that's something to keep in mind. So there's a very powerful reinforcing effect. Now, imagine that not only do you get that reinforcing effect, but if you have an underlying mental health problem, such as anxiety and depression, and the substance makes it go away or takes you out of the scene, say through what we call a blackout, which just means you lose any consciousness about, you lose consciousness and then you wake up and you really don't know what happened, but you know that you had taken yourself away from whatever pain or trauma you may have had. So that's really the biology of it. And we emphasize the biology because we want people to understand they have an illness. Addicts, alcoholics are not bad people. They're all of us. They're all the people around us, but they engage in behaviors which make them look undesirable. And what we need to do then is to get these people and treat them as quickly as possible. And in the last session, one of the other speakers mentioned, if you call for help and the person doesn't respond within 24 hours, move on and find another provider, because this illness results in fatalities. If you think about addiction, it's a biological illness. It's characterized by preoccupation with the substance. Nothing is more important if you have addiction or alcoholism. And it's characterized by loss of control. One drink is too many, and 1,000 is never enough. So you need to think about that. Detox is not treatment. Detox is one part of treatment. It's the earliest part. It has to be followed by rehabilitation, a series of learning behaviors in terms of how to cope with anxiety, depression, and that can mean psychiatric treatment. And going beyond that, there's life skills that have to be relearned. So a disease as serious as addiction or alcoholism doesn't get treated in 7 days. Think of it as a lifetime of treatment at different levels of treatment, less intense, but treatment that really works is projected over a long time. Remember, alcoholism and addiction is a chronic, progressive, and if untreated, often a fatal illness.
Sorry, thank you, Jeff. Good points. And I didn't interrupt for the timing because you were like on a roll there with that. It was terrific. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Tova for a personal perspective. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Jeff, so much. I just want to say it's an honor to be asked to be a part of this, and just want to share with you guys a little bit about what it is like in recovery coming from home. So I come from an Orthodox Jewish home and was raised, I went to yeshiva my whole life, all the chagim, and we kept a very strict kosher home. And everything was a very sheltered life in my Jewish community. The thing that I've come to terms with and agree with Jeff about is that it is a biological genetic component for me. I have addiction right in the immediate mother and father. My mother's an alcoholic and my father has addiction with food, and it runs in my family. And from the beginning of when I was introduced to alcohol, it was always a blackout drunk. I don't really have experience with drinking just to get lightheaded or like, on Pesach, like to enjoy it. I don't know of that world. And when I look back now in 6 years of sobriety, I see I have been looking for something to get me out of myself from kindergarten. And I can remember that. I've heard people in the program I'm in, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, I've heard them say, I was looking for a drink in kindergarten. And that was true for me, that there was never enough attention. It was never enough love. It was never emotional support. My friends never made me, included. And all that was delusional, because the truth is that none of that was facts. Yes, I had been victim to tremendous trauma as a child. And, I definitely think in many ways that I self-medicated through portions of my life, but I look around at other people who have been through trauma in the Jewish community, and they did not respond the same way that I did. And as a very young adult, I sought out substances other than alcohol, drugs specifically, because I could not control the drinking. And there's more delusion, right? Because I wasn't controlling my drug use either. and it was never enough. It was more now and again. And I remember there was a group of people who love and adore me and want the best for me, even though I had betrayed their trust and lied to them consistently and had stolen from them and have done them tremendous harm. They got involved and had a conference call / intervention because nobody was going to get to see me at that time. I was full. And they had to have a conference call because nobody knew what the truth was. Everybody was being given snippets of what was actually happening. And they said to me, you know, Tova, this is going to be catastrophic when you pass away from this. And I was unable to see how bad it had gotten because my disease, my illness really tells me it's not as bad as that person, the comparisons, right? So when I went into detox and I went to Bellevue in Manhattan, I remember well, I don't remember. Somebody reminded me a month ago when I decided to take this commitment. She said to me, you know, you would call, and I was crying. It's devastating. And I kept saying, I don't belong here. I don't fit in here. Right. And this is, I think, the most critical purpose of why I've decided to do this, which is addiction and alcoholism does go on in the Jewish community 100%. And I had to come to terms with the fact that, you know, while I may come from a different background and a different home and a different culture, I am the same as every other alcoholic and drug addict, in which I sought a solution. Drugs and alcohol was not the problem for me. Quite the contrary. It was the solution to what was going on inside of what, you know, was a mental and physical compulsion. And that I was the same. I am just like them. It was 25 men on the unit, actually. I was the only female. And I still was able to learn and see that, like, in order for me to have this beautiful journey that I have today with recovery, I need to really realize that. And you know, ironically enough, I was matched up with a sponsor, which is how it works in the program I'm in recovery, who is a Jewish woman. And you know, part of this whole process, which was like to make a decision when I came in, right? And what does that mean, a decision? It means all the other options had not worked for me. They had failed. And what else was I left with? Well, I was left with giving this a try and seeing what was going to happen for me. And, you know, I was reintroduced to this objection, which is, where do I fit with this? You know, and how does religion play a role for me? And the truth is that I have asked rabbis from the gamut, Hasidic, Sephardic, Ashkenazi, all over rabbis about me feeling this way. And I have been Mechal Shabbat, you know, I don't keep kosher. Just the different ways of prayer that has been introduced to me, to have this option of a solution greater than myself, that it is not contingent on whether or not I'm an Orthodox Jew anymore. You know, and all those rabbis concur that has never been a reality. Like, and this is something that I've had to come to on my own, that no matter where I am, no matter what is going on for me, you know, in my religion, like the power that is capable and has changed me inside and out loves me no matter what. And I lived in sober living in my early sobriety, the first year and a half. How much time do I have, Rochelle? Am I at the 2-minute mark? Yeah. Okay.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. All right. We're doing better this time. So, you know, when I came there, they had very strict rules about sleeping out, not sleeping out. And my father's a rabbi. He's not a pulpit rabbi, but he's very well versed in halacha. And I felt guilty, you know, this guilt that I still have 6 years into sobriety. Not that that's a substantial amount of time, but like, I still feel quite complexity about how I am in terms of the, you know, the religion. And he said to me, your only job in life, Tova, to be able to complete it, is to stay sober and stay alive. And we have to remember this as the Jewish community, like, what is the most important thing is our life. And I've had to really allow myself and give myself permission to be this beautiful woman and heal from that. And I still, like I said, you know, it is not conditional on whether or not I'm speaking from certain words. I've come to have this relationship. And one other thing that I wanted to say, which is, you know, I've come into this world as this narrow-minded, single-celled drug addict, and now I'm like this incredibly multidimensional woman, grown woman who is an educator, who is a friend, who is a sister, a daughter, a niece, an aunt, able to show up, and I live a different life. You know, that is the difference, is that I live a different life. I am thoroughly honest today with people. I can look anyone in the eye and not have to feel worried of whether or not I'm speaking the truth. And I do that behind closed doors as well. And that is really the crux of how it is I gave this process a real fair chance, and it has solved the problem. It's an alternate solution for me, and it works. Thank you so much again for letting me speak here this morning. And yeah, that's all.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Tova. Really very inspirational. And I'm learning so much too. Okay, so we're going to go to Sharon now. Thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, I did see some questions in the chat. Please continue to ask the questions in the chat, and I'm gathering them together, and we'll ask them when they're finished.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone. Really good to see some old faces and new faces in this group. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing. And thank you, Tova, for sharing your story. I think, you know, it's so important to hear all the different perspectives, from theory to the real stories, and how that impacts ourselves and our lives and the people that we know and love and care for. I've known Tova for many, many years, and I said this in the last session and I'll say it again. Tova is a miracle and a great success story, but she really worked at it to get to this point and had to change, you know, inside her what she wanted to do and make that conscious effort to say, I want to make a change. I'm unhappy with my life. And she's a miracle. And I think it's an incredible journey that she's been on. But unfortunately, there are many, many young people who didn't make it. And they weren't intending to die from an overdose. And they didn't wake up that day and say, hey, today's the day I'm going to do a ton of drugs and die from it. They were just very unhappy and were not getting the right help, or struggling to get the right help. Families didn't know what to do, or someone wasn't willing to. And unfortunately, for as long as I've been in this field, there's been, and part of the Jewish community in addiction and mental health, every week you're hearing of Jewish young people dying and adults. And it's just such a tragedy. And I never, when we do these presentations, we should never forget about those people that didn't make it, unfortunately, and all those lives that were gone. And with that, it should be also for us to be able to address these issues and not be in denial, which is a very common thing that Jewish people like to do. We want to deny it, we want to hide it. It's not happening to us. It couldn't happen to me. It wouldn't happen to my child or my brother or my parents. And there's shame, and that's such a sad thing, because we're all going through it in one way or another. People are having different experiences, and the question is how do we deal with this and how we address it without having to have continuously lives die or become so unmanageable where families are collapsing. I've always wished that they put us out of business and we wouldn't have to be in this, but unfortunately it's just part of life, and that's what it is. And it's staying positive and working through it. And, you know, Jeff had touched on it before, you know, one of the biggest things we see when it comes to addiction, all kinds of addiction, is really like, what is the underlying facts that come with that? Are we really dealing with, and I'm going to really list it out, was there a traumatic experience that happened? And not just like Sarge had said, my parents got divorced kind of thing. We were talking about like sexual abuse, physical abuse, those kind of traumas that are not being, you know, that we don't talk about, or they're very hush, hush, quiet in the world, or people don't believe really happen. And the mental health thing, which Jeff had said very clearly about addressing those issues so we can be more successful in our recovery journey. And the social and peer pressures that come, especially with young people drinking and drugging. And as we said, like from a surgery or an accident that's happening, that has happened, not a doctor prescribing the medication, but that they wasn't maintained or supervised the medication that they were given to treat the pain that they were in. And so all of a sudden, this person has become dependent on the medications because they have back pain, but the back pain only lasts for X amount of time. But no one's addressing that, and the doctors aren't following up with that. So those are another kind of person that might become dependent to substance use. And I think those areas are very important to address and be aware of when someone goes on their recovery journey or tries to get into recovery. And again, recovery is a long, long journey. It's not a quick fix. It's something that is part of a lifestyle that we make and be part of. And helping someone is someone that wants to be helped, right? Not someone who is not willing. We can do whatever we want in this journey as parents, as brothers, sisters, social workers, educators. But if someone doesn't want to, the hardest thing is to force them into treatment and push them. And that's the most frustrating part in a journey. But when someone is willing, that's the key thing of running and responding quickly to that and being able to help someone having those channels available for you. And with that being treatment out there, there's lots of different kind of treatment opportunities, options out in America. And this is a great country to be in to get that for you. And I call it the Jew card. And, you know, there's no Jew card playing, I can't go into treatment or get help because I'm Jewish or because I keep kosher or because it's Shabbos. Nowadays, treatment centers are accommodating, they're helpful. They can sit and accommodate your needs from getting kosher food into keeping Shabbos, all these different journeys. And with that, there's also different kind of treatments out there. There's some treatment centers address trauma, some address more with mental health. So there's a differences out there, and there are options knowing what someone is struggling with and what they need to get help with. So those are different options there. There's inpatient, there's outpatient. So people can pick. I usually like people to go into inpatient because I think it gives a person an opportunity to really focus on themselves and not worry about it. But that's a luxury. Not everyone has that luxury to go inpatient, but there are other opportunities to be able to do outpatient treatment. And I think that's a very important option. There should be no, I can't go to treatment anymore and I can't get help. There is so much availability out there. You just have to know the right people to ask and to get that support and guidance with. And especially, you know, like I mentioned in the last group too, we talked about 12-step. Some people say, I don't go to 12-step group. It's not for me. I tried it, it doesn't work out. Again, we feel it's really important to be able to connect to a group. What kind of group that is can be up to the person what they feel comfortable doing. And we don't want them to feel like, oh, I can't go to this. So to pick something that you're comfortable to start with, and it's a progression. So it could be 12-step, it might be a SMART group. There are Dharma groups, there's different groups, even support groups within the Jewish community are now providing different, whether it's 12-step groups or family support groups. So there's different stuff out there. You just have to know what is available and try and help someone pick something or be part of it. How am I doing with my time? I didn't check. I have a little bit
You're
more.
doing great. You have another minute if you want to share something.
I have another minute. So
Yes,
I think I'm just going to end with about the fact that it's important to not sit and be a bystander in this journey. We're frequently watching people go through this and we don't speak up. We're too scared to speak out. So I always encourage you not to be a bystander. You wouldn't watch someone who's drowning in a pool. You'd jump in and help them, or you'd send them a life vest. So again, to be able to speak out to someone that you love and care is so important, and not to ignore it and pretend it's not there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon, Jeff, and Tova. Thank you for all the information that you've shared. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. Just some messages before we get to the questions. All these sessions are being recorded, and you'll be able to go onto both websites in order to listen to them. I am gathering the two websites to share them with you in the chat, and I'll share them a few times repeatedly. And so I'll get those to you. And let me just read through some of the questions for you. And okay, all right. First question. I have a 22-year-old who is bipolar and treated for that, but he is addicted to weed. He doesn't see it as an addiction, and so how do you get help for someone like that? All three of you can unmute if you want, and then
I'm going to leave that question to the professionals.
I'm going to let Jeff take the lead in this one, and then I'll add in my 2 pennies.
Okay. Weed, marijuana is probably the most difficult substance that we deal with. It's easier to remove someone from an opioid or alcohol than weed. And there's a perception that weed is benign. It is a significant psychotropic drug, and it has profound impacts on its own in terms of causing depression, what we call an apathetic state where people just sit around and all they do is smoke weed all day. And you see that a lot in young people who are even in college situations. So if you have someone who's being treated for bipolar disorder and they're having a problem with weed, it's best to get them to a professional who is certified in addictions, and that could be either an addiction psychiatrist, a social worker who has credentials, or a licensed practical counselor. And they need to sit with that person and explain what the effect is of the substance on their bipolar disorder. Hopefully they're getting good treatment for the bipolar disorder. Ideally, the same person, the same team that treats the person should be the team that brings this issue up. And the ideal treatment situation is one in which any mental health problems and substance use problems are treated by the same people. When you hear someone say, I don't deal with alcoholism, I don't deal with addiction, you're in the wrong room. You need to find another professional. And there are adequate numbers of professionals who can deal with both problems simultaneously.
Wow. Thank you. Do either of you have something else to add to that? You're on mute.
I agree with Jeff completely. He articulated it beautifully.
Okay.
So I think part of that, I want to just add, it's someone being willing to. So because you're talking about someone with a mental health issue, becomes so much more challenging in that. So a bit of, I think, patience, not giving up is a very key factor here too. Loving that person still with good boundaries. You don't have to agree with what they're doing, but love them still. And I think if, as Jeff said, if you can get them to the point of talking about it so they can rationalize it in their head is a really big step. But it's getting them there and getting them willing to do it is a real key thing, and perseverance. So don't give up.
Okay, our next question. How can you tell the difference between an addict who shows symptoms of a mood disorder and a person with a mood disorder who self-medicates and becomes addicted?
So I can answer that question, and that's a very common thing that we have to deal with. When people come into treatment often, the detox or rehab, and they've been using for a while, all the substances that we've been talking about have the capability of causing what looks like a mental health problem. Weed, opioids can all cause depression. Heavy use of weed can cause a state that looks like a psychotic disorder. Methamphetamine can do that. Alcohol can make people appear to be confused. It can make them appear to be even demented, but it can make them look depressed. So the thing that has to happen is you need to get someone into the care of a team, again, that allows them to detox, come off of the substance. And after they're off of the substance and they're, so to speak, their brains have been cleaned out, you can see what is residual. And if it doesn't go away, because after you've detoxed the person and given their brains a chance to heal, then you know that what you're left with is an underlying depression. And remember that underlying depression could have been the push, the stimulus for someone to start using. But remember, all the substances can mimic, can make someone look as though they have another psychiatric disorder. That's why you need to pick people who just don't say, well, I know a little bit about addiction, I can handle it. You need to pick a team made up of experts.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, a question for Tova. Did growing up in a frum community make it harder to seek help, your father notwithstanding? Did your friends and relatives consider addiction ashanda? Maybe you would translate ashanda with the same How would you
If you
translate?
could translate Ashanda, that would be really great. Not that I don't, I just would prefer, you know.
Right. I'm trying to think. A real scar
Ashanda
on
is
the
like a
family.
disgrace.
Yeah, a disgrace, right?
Yeah. I guess that, I mean, for me, it was not like that at all. I think the biggest component wasn't like a shanda or like embarrassment. It was more like the denial component where my friends were just so happy because by the time I really got into a detox and got help, I had been, you know, non-communicative with anyone for years. Like nobody knew where I was literally. So I think people were just like, oh, thank God you're alive. And, you know, it had been so long for me that I felt more disconnected than they did. They all went about their lives. They were just so happy that I was okay. And, you know, this is where I learned about my delusion, because when I told people, oh, I've gone into this career and this and that, everyone's like, oh my God, you're amazing at that. We always thought that. And, you know, you were always so cool. And I was like, wow, I really was in this self-centered state of mind. And that was just more evidence for me. But I think really my dad was just so happy for me. He would have done anything to help me. And he continues to show up as an unconditional father. And I'm grateful for that. But the only, you know, not Shanda, but like just the denial of people unable to see that I would go over to family's house for Shabbat and would be literally sleeping the entire time, and that I wasn't that tired, you know. Or when I was living in sober living and my mom lives in another country and she would come to visit and I would like, come see my life, you know, and it was like unable to wrap her head around the fact that like my child has an illness. So I don't really identify with that component of it. And, you know, also I was introduced to JACS, which is an organization for Jews in recovery with chemical and all other, the gamut of addiction, when I was 16 years old. So I was exposed to the fact that while we don't talk about it enough, like it does happen to Jews you know, that it's okay. So I think I was like armored with that. I don't have experience with that. No, I'm very grateful.
Another question for Tova. Do you know about twisted parenting, Avi
Nope.
Fishoff approach with teens? You don't know about it. Okay, let me just finish the question. Maybe there's something you can address in there. Do you think for teens, additional acceptance, love, regardless of level of Yiddishkeit, would have made a difference for you? I'm not asking for commentary on twisted parenting. Just do you think his approach has validity? I'm an Al-Anoner for lots of years, and his approach is in direct conflict with advocacy for 12 steps in this area. It has, however, helped me immensely, except where my kid is in her journey in Yiddishkeit. So I would like to know from the perspective of an addict.
So I just want to translate in case anybody doesn't know what Yiddishkeit is. It's like the emotional and spiritual connection to Judaism. And I'm not really sure. I don't know if Sharon or Jeff knows what this is. I still don't understand what it is. So I don't want to answer a question where I don't really understand what this parenting is. Maybe somebody could inform me a little bit better. I don't understand how to answer that if I don't know what that is.
Sharon, are you okay if I explain a little bit to Tova? Twisted parenting. That's okay. Sharon, can I get thumbs up from you? Great. Okay, thank you. I know. Great. Thank you, Sharon. So Tova, it's an approach that Avi Fishoff, who's based in Brooklyn, used with kids who were struggling with addiction or came from, who were just maybe off the derech, as they called it. And what he did was he showered them with love and kindness and support. And they got rewards and so on. So he, and you know, instead of, and in those days when he started his program, there was a whole, should we go with a tough love approach, kick your kid out, don't keep them in the home, that kind of thing. So when he started off, it was very kind of different approach to the recovery world, or some parts of it, and some. So Sharon, add in if I'm off a little bit. I mean, I think it's how do you think that approach in the recovery world, Tova, for you on your journey would have worked?
Oh, okay. So 100% no, not for me. While I think love, kindness is very important to show any human, especially to a newcomer in sobriety or anybody in sobriety, like love and kindness and patience, and is just like imperative that we treat people that way. The energy expels itself. However, for me, I had to be broken down and everything was taken away from me and had to work very hard in order to earn the things that I have. So do I think positive reinforcements, rewards, and stuff like that would have been helpful? 100% not. In fact, Jeff talked about this reward system. I'm obsessed with the reward system. So for me to learn how to face feelings, process feelings, follow through in things when it doesn't feel good, that is essential to my life today, because I don't get to give myself a good feeling every time I, don't like the way things go. And I don't think that's good for the real alcoholic and the real drug addict. I think that it's not a good way to go. Listen, Sharon, you talked about this in the last session. Is this type of recovery that I am in for everyone? No, it's not. And does it work for other people who are outside of it? Yesha koch, my hat is off to you. Good for you that it works. I'm happy for you. I want everybody who suffers from this, like I did, the way I suffered, to feel full and feel happy and not be tethered to such a terrible illness. But personally, I don't find anything positive about allowing an addict to be given rewards for what they're doing. That comes with the spiritual component that I have. Like I keep saying, I found another solution, that has no consequences. That's where the reward comes in, is like, Tova, you're okay no matter where you are. You will never come undone again. You will always be in my protection and care. And when I'm rewarding myself, I'm creating delusional states. So again, I want to make it clear, I'm not telling somebody that I think that is a bad way. I'm saying good for whomever it is that it does work for. And I'm always grateful that somebody in the Jewish community, has gone ahead and pioneered something. Like, we have to continue to do that for our community. But for me, not a good match. I hope that was a gentle. I can be a little blunt and brute sometimes because I feel very strongly about it. And if
You
again,
tell it like it is. That's what you do.
Yeah,
I
tell it like it is, but I try to say it nicely.
Right. But I think that was the question. I think that what we're coming out from this question and what we're coming out from this whole experience today is that there is a way out there for everyone. And if the first time you make that call and that first interaction you have for getting help for yourself or the person who needs it is not working, then pick up the phone and call another, and pick up the phone and call another. Yep. I think that's what we got, but that the support is there, and the first step will have to come either from the individual or the loved one of the individual, but the help is there. And if for anything else, if you don't know where to turn, come to timetotalkaddiction.org and put yourself out there. We are here to help. Rafa'enu, we are here to help. The emails are in the chat. I'll send them again as we speak. And somebody asked about emails.